What's going on, guys, and welcome back. Over the last couple of months, I've been doing quite a few little inshore dives in a bunch of different areas, and we've managed to have some pretty good success. This time of year for us tends to be pretty fishy, but we get a lot of rain, which makes the water quite dirty. So with a bit of persistence, you can still knock over some great fish. So, day one, the Barramundi season had just opened, so plan was to go and try and find some of them, but the week leading into the open, we had quite a lot of rain, and anywhere we usually get barra was just too dirty. Pretty much couldn't see your hands. So we decided we'd head a little further out, away from the creeks, to hopefully find a bit better viz, and we did alright, managed to find a couple of meters viz on some ledges and got some nice reef fish.
After a bit of driving around, not finding many places with any viz on them, we decided to go to a bit shallower ledge, maybe 6 or 10 meters depth, and just see if we could find anything there. Luckily, this spot turned out to be the clearest we found all day, and although it usually only holds small fish, the conditions we had had previously didn't allow for much diving, so it had had a bit of a break, and that allowed for a few nice fish to move back into some of the better areas on the ledge. After getting that trout, I had set my sights on tuskfish. Now I had seen a few nice fish, maybe 4 to 6 kilo, around this particular patch of rock, but was unable to get a shot at them on the first few dives. By this stage, the tide had changed and the current was starting to pick up, so I had one last dive, using the current to drift along and check the whole patch where I was seeing them, and right at the back of these rocks was exactly the fish that I'd hoped for.
Day two, the viz inshore was still no good. The barra diving wasn't much point at this time, so I took the chance. We had some really small tides and I got out to a wreck that I'd been wanting to dive for a while. It was a little bit deeper, so really need the slack tide, and it turned out to be a pretty epic little dive spot.
Although I wasn't really targeting anything specific on this wreck, I had hoped to find a few nanny guy, and in particular some largemouth nannies. The first couple of drops were pretty promising, with a nice healthy school of these smallmouth nannies mixed in with a bunch of trevally, and it wasn't long before we found some nice fish on the bottom that were worth taking a shot at. After I missed that jack, it was obviously pretty spooked and I never saw it again. However, only a few dives later, I did find a couple of largemouth nannies. They weren't big fish by any means, but I've not shot one before and they were pretty tasty, so I decided I'd take the shot. As you can probably tell by now, I couldn't manage to hit water if I fell out of a boat. So I did the logical thing and I blamed the spear gun, because there's no way it was my fault. Anyway, a few dives go by and now both the jack and the largemouth are nowhere to be seen, but luckily enough, I hadn't yet managed to scare away the school of smallmouth, so I guess one of those would just have to do. When I landed that fish, I realised they weren't as big as I'd originally thought, and although they were still well over the legal size, I figured I'd leave the rest of them and come back when they were bigger. At this stage, the dive was coming to an end and one of the lads was having trouble with his ear and couldn't make it to the bottom. Having mentioned a few cod I'd saw and having a pretty empty esky, he'd asked if I could take one of the cod for him, so I took one last dive and secured a nice fish.
Day 3, the viz inshore finally had started to improve, so the focus was back on Barramundi. We decided it was going to be maybe our last chance, sort of leading out of the time of year we tend to pick up a few. So we put in a big trip, do a bunch of miles, check a bunch of spots, but it was just a really quiet day. We did find one good school of fish, one of the lads got one, and I managed a nice mangrove jack, but really it wasn't what we'd hoped for. So there won't be too much of that video in there, considering most of it's just staring into the green abyss, but I'll roll on what we did get anyhow.
I left this clip in just to give you a bit of an example of what we're looking for when we're chasing these fish. This was some of the better vids for the day, and to be honest, this is usually the better end of what we target them in. But they love these sorts of areas with big logs and big boulders around that they can use for a bit of cover. Although a lot of the time they will actually be swimming around outside of these areas, passing from rock to rock, or even just swimming on the sand down at the edge of the rocks and things. So it can pay to find a good looking spot where you can use a bit of cover and just sit still for as long as you can and wait for them to come to you. Now you might notice that the colour of this clip looks a bit off. That's because I've had to alter it quite a bit just so that the fish is actually visible in the video. This was the only barra I saw for the entire 8 hours of diving we did, and of course, I missed. But have a look and see if you can spot the fish before I take the shot. After a few more hours without seeing a single thing, we started the journey home, but decided we'd check the first spot that was a bit clearer on our way out, and I was rewarded with a decent mangrove jack to save me from the donut.
bit sour after our efforts with the Barramundi, I decided we'd turn our attention to mackerel, but having the new Spanish closures in place pretty much meant we were targeting broadbar only. These are a great fish to hunt, not as big as the Spanish, but just as good eating I find, and you can find them pretty close to shore. So we headed to an artificial where I'd found a few before, and there was plenty of bait around, so we ended up having a pretty good morning.
First few dives were looking good. There was plenty of viz and stacks of these little herring, which the mackerel really love. And after only a few short dives sitting on top of these blocks, we had some really nice fish come in on us. After securing the title for the most missed fish in one video and doing my job of scaring away my target species once again, it was time to look inside the blocks and have a go at some slow moving targets to give me a chance at actually hitting something. After taking a couple of fish from this spot, it was time to move on, so we headed for a bit of rocky ledge that I've got some nice fish off before, and by some miracle, I've managed to hit a fish that wasn't completely still. If you've made it this far, cheers for watching, and if you've enjoyed the video, make sure you follow along as there's many more to come.